Hello and welcome to The World Today, only on China Global Television Network. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. We begin with your top story this hour, where Chinese President Xi Jinping has held phone talks with his Brazilian counterpart, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, pledging to deepen cooperation and jointly safeguard the shared interests of the global South. President Xi said China's high-quality development will provide more opportunities for cooperation with Brazil. In 2024, the two leaders announced the elevation of bilateral ties to a China-Brazil community with a shared future for a more just world and a more sustainable planet. Over the past year, cooperation has gained strong momentum, with closer alignment of development strategies setting an example for the global South solidarity. As China begins its 15th five-year plan this year, the country will expand high-level opening up to support high-quality development. He urged China and Brazil, both constructive forces safeguarding world peace and improving global governance, to stand on the right side of history, better safeguard the shared interests of the global South, and jointly maintain the UN's core role, international fairness and justice. President Lula said President Xi's 2024 historic state visit to Brazil lifted bilateral relations to a new level. He reaffirmed Brazil's readiness to strengthen cooperation with China, uphold multilateralism, and enhance coordination within the BRICS grouping to promote regional and global peace and stability. Meanwhile, President Xi, who's also General Secretary of the Communist Party of China's Central Committee, has sent his congratulations to To Lam on his re-election as General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam's Central Committee. To Lam was elected to the position for the first time in August 2024. Now, the lower house of Japan's National Diet has formally dissolved ahead of a general election scheduled for February the 8th. The move by Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi comes as she looks for a fresh mandate in her program for government, which includes increased military spending. Last month, her cabinet approved a record national budget of around $780 billion for the 2026 fiscal year, inflating the country's already huge debt. Takaichi's ruling coalition is expected to meet a stout challenge, with the main opposition Constitutional Democratic Party fielding key allies. Terence Terashima now reports from Tokyo.
Campaign will start from the 27th January and voting takes place on the 8th of February. Now, Takaichi said she wanted the public endorsement if she was the right Prime Minister, and also if the public approve of the new coalition party that was formed after the Komeito, the long-standing partner, left the coalition with the LDP. Now, this is the first time that the snap election is going to take place in January since 1992. Takaichi's support rate is high, nearly 70%, but the LDP support rate stands at 29%. So some voters may not be vote for LDP again because LDP have not solved the slush fund money scandal issues. It is very hard to read because of these several points how much Takaichi will gain the seats in the LDP, but she is looking for the majority. Takaichi herself has not ruled out nuclear deterrence option, though her government has affirmed that Tokyo's commitment to the three non-nuclear principles stands, and there's so much opposition from the Japanese public in changing these nuclear principles.
Meanwhile, the Chinese Commerce Ministry says a move to strengthen export controls on dual-use items to Japan is fully legitimate, reasonable and lawful. Dual-use items are goods, software and technology that can be used for both civilian and military applications. Following criticism, officials say the export controls aim to curb Tokyo's attempts at remilitarization and the pursuit of nuclear armament. The ministry added that Beijing approves applications that clearly meet civilian use requirements to safeguard global supply chain stability.
As a responsible major country, China has always actively fulfilled its non-proliferation obligations. In accordance with laws and regulations, China bans the export of all dual-use items to Japanese military users, for Japan's military use and for any other end users and end-use purposes that could help enhance Japan's military capabilities. The move is aimed at curbing Japan's attempts at remilitarization and acquiring nuclear weapons. And it is completely legitimate, reasonable, and lawful. Meanwhile, China has always been committed to maintaining the stability and security of the global production and supply chains. The procedures for export license applications and reviews all comply with laws and regulations. I would like to reiterate once again that China approves all export applications that meet the conditions of civilian use.
U.S. President Donald Trump says the White House is negotiating a deal to secure Washington's total access to Greenland with no time limit. Trump also says the U.S. will work with NATO on Greenland security after he and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte agreed to a framework for a future deal concerning the Arctic island. But Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen says Rutte does not have a mandate to negotiate on behalf of Denmark or Greenland. Yolo Abdafid reports from Davos.
What we do know, and this has come from both sides now, that there is a framework that the US can perform military operations in Greenland. They can have intelligence officers there and training. And there is some facilitating in terms of local development, which could include potentially mining for minerals and potentially rare earths. And that without asking for the permission of Denmark. Now that will be seen as quite controversial, and there will be definitely questions from Denmark about that, not least because the permit, the licensing of drilling for minerals in the future has already been devolved to the Greenlandic Parliament. So there will be questions about that for certain. But at least, whether it's a climb down, whether it's another turn, at least there's no threat of military action. And for now, the threats of tariffs against 8 other countries that sent troops to Greenland a few days ago has gone away as well. But of course, it doesn't mean that the sovereignty of Greenland has changed, and that's where the details are still sketchy, and that's where the Greenlanders and the Danes themselves will want some guarantees. And of course, it's worth remembering there is a 1951 military agreement between the United States and Denmark which allows American troops to be stationed in Greenland in place anyway. Well, all eyes really are on the Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, and the Foreign Minister who went to Washington, D.C. the other day, Lars Løkke Rasmussen. Both of them are experienced, and both of them know full well they have to tread carefully in Denmark and especially with the Greenlanders. But they say they will not negotiate away any sovereignty. They've been clear and consistent about that since last year, or even in 2019 when it was first broached in Donald Trump's first term in the White House. So they do welcome the de-escalation in terms of tariff and military. They're happy about that, but they are worried about American representatives in Greenland and without permission, and they are concerned about that.
Meanwhile, Greenland's Prime Minister says he was not included in discussions on Trump's framework deal over the territory and is unaware of its contents.
As I said, I don't know what there is in the agreement or the deal about my country, that over some discussions I didn't attend. I don't know what concrete in it. What I'm saying is that we have a high-level working group that will sort things out.
Well, the European Union held an emergency summit on the matter in Brussels late on Thursday. The bloc's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, says transatlantic relations have taken a big blow over the past week. Despite signaling the will to strengthen transatlantic cooperation, EU leaders warned they are ready to act if Trump threatens them again. The Danish Prime Minister has reaffirmed that Greenland's sovereignty is not negotiable.
You're asking about red lines? We have them. Of course, I think it's clear for everybody that we are a sovereign state, and we cannot negotiate about that because it's a part of the very basic democratic values. But of course, we can discuss with the US how we can strengthen our common cooperation on security in the Arctic region.
I would also like to reiterate to the Danish Prime Minister our full support for the discussions that will be held. And we remain extremely vigilant and therefore ready to use the instruments at our disposal if we were to again be under threat.
Russia, Ukraine and the US are set to hold security talks in Abu Dhabi on Friday. Moscow announced the news after a late-night meeting between President Vladimir Putin and 3 US envoys. The Kremlin says the meeting was substantive, constructive and frank, but it warned that territorial issues had to be resolved for durable peace to happen. President Vladimir Putin has expressed that Russia is sincerely interested in a diplomatic solution. Before the US envoys met with Putin, US President Donald Trump met with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky in Davos. Zelensky said the two leaders spoke about documents and air defense for Ukraine. Trump said the Russia-Ukraine conflict must end. Well, President Trump also formally launched the so-called Board of Peace at a charter signing ceremony during the World Economic Forum in Davos. The board was established to oversee the redevelopment of Gaza, which has been left devastated following 2 years of Israeli attacks. Observers warn it could undermine the primacy of the United Nations and the established multilateral framework for peacekeeping. Some major global powers and US allies have declined to join. Speaking at the signing event, Trump said the board could do what it wants and would operate in conjunction with the UN. Hamas has criticized Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's inclusion on the board, saying it contradicts the principles of justice and accountability. European Union President Antonio Costa says the EU has doubts about the many elements of the board, including its scope, governance and compatibility with the UN Charter. Ireland's Prime Minister says the EU will seek further clarification regarding the board.
There is an issue in terms of the fundamental point about the United Nations being the key arbiter for peace in the world and conflict resolution, and obviously we're aligned to the UN. So it's a much different proposition to the one originally envisaged by the UN resolution, but we will seek further clarification. We're anxious to contribute to conflict resolution and peace in Gaza and to support in a humanitarian way the situation there.
Well, we leave it there on The World Today this hour. Do stay tuned. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in our Africa Live program. conflict in Sudan locks more than 8 million children out of school. We continue our coverage of the ongoing deadly flooding across much of southern Africa. And we'll explore what's next for Africa's health sector as the US officially exits the World Health Organization. Wherever you're tuning in, hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Here's what else is coming up. In business, the Nigerian government approves new incentives for oil giant Shell and its offshore project in the country. And coming up in sports, record winners Al Ahly host Yanga of Tanzania as the CAF Champions League resumes. Well, we begin with the Sudan conflict, where the near 3-year conflict is not just having a bearing on the country's present, but also its long-term future. More than 8 million children, or nearly half of the country's school-aged children, have been out of school since the fighting began in April 2023. This is according to a report by aid organization Save the Children. It comes ahead of the International Day of Education that the UN established to mark the role of education in peace and development. The west of the country, where the bulk of the fighting is taking place, is the most impacted. Only 3% of the hundreds of schools in North Darfur state are currently open. At around 13%, it's marginally better in neighboring South Darfur. West Kordofan, which borders South Darfur, has a similar percentage. Additionally, many teachers have not received salaries for months now, forcing some of them to abandon their jobs. Save the Children warns that without immediate funding to restore learning, Sudan's education system risks total breakdown. Meanwhile, the UN has expressed concern over increased drone attacks in North Kordofan state, which officials say are endangering civilians and further restricting humanitarian access. Multiple drone strikes were reported on Tuesday in some villages, both to the north and southeast of El Obeid city. UN says these areas lie along a critical logistics corridor, and the attacks risk severing the city's eastern supply lines. A separate drone strike also targeted El Obeid on Thursday, killing at least 65 people who were attending a funeral. Meanwhile, in North Darfur state, the UN has reported shortfalls in food assistance for new arrivals at displacement camps in Tawila and is calling on donors to step up support.
We again underscore that all parties must protect civilians and must protect civilian infrastructure and must ensure the safe, rapid, and unhindered access for humanitarian goods and staff. WFP warns that by the end of March, it will have exhausted its food stocks in Sudan and urgently requires $700 million to sustain life-saving operations through June of this year. We urge donors to step up support. In 2026, we and our partners are calling for $2.9 billion United States dollars to reach more than 20 million people who are in urgent need of assistance.
Well, now millions of people have fled the war in Sudan, looking for refuge in neighboring countries like Chad, Egypt, and South Sudan. But cross-border displacements are a common problem across the wider Sahel region, with people fleeing everything from insurgencies and persecution to economic hardship. In Mauritania on the Atlantic coast, the UN has renewed a bold new plan to help deal with the crisis. However, as Adnan Chawashi reports, the host country is already coming under pressure.
After supporting 471,000 people under a $152 million budget last year, authorities in Nouakchott say this year's refugee plan will move beyond emergency aid, focusing instead on resilience, jobs, and development.
The Emergency Contingency Plan for 2026 reinforces this approach by adopting an anticipatory and forward-looking framework. This enables national institutions and partners to prepare for any potential new inflows, shorten response times, and limit the humanitarian, economic, social, and environmental impacts on host areas.
The UN Refugee Agency says that arrivals are continuing, prompting calls for an urgent financing and assistance mechanism.
Inflows continue, and the risks of acceleration linked to border dynamics, combined with gaps already evident in 2025, make rapid financing essential.
Experts say the growing strain on services in the country's refugee camps highlights the urgent need for additional funding.
Mounting pressure on health and social services is driving the need for increased support at Mbera camp to keep the hospitals, schools and essential services running.
Observers stress the refugee challenge must focus on building up local host communities.
When all the priorities of local populations hosting refugees are taken into account, the result is a strengthening of the conditions that enable these communities to remain and endure, along with the provision of services that can help reduce the heavy costs they bear.
Mauritania is urging partners to boost support, warning that host community stability depends on sustained investment, not emergency aid alone. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN.
On to our coverage of the devastating floods in much of southern Africa, with incessant heavy rains inflicting death and destruction across the wide region. In Zimbabwe, at least 83 people have been killed and over 1,300 homes destroyed over the past several weeks. Government and humanitarian agencies say emergency relief operations are continuing there. CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya now reports.
January's torrential rains have caused flooding across all 10 of Zimbabwe's provinces, with Manicaland province near the border with Mozambique the hardest hit. Thousands of homes have been destroyed, bridges have been washed away, and roads damaged.
The artisanal miners, they had their mining holes along the waterways, and they were filled. It's like most of them were buried in some of those. Some is a result of lightning. Lightning has got also a big toll on that figure.
Authorities say several people have also drowned while attempting to cross flooded rivers. Working with the Civil Protection Department, the Red Cross Society of Zimbabwe is
along the Sahel River.
Officials say real-time updates from the field show conditions improving in some of the worst affected areas. While flood waters have receded in some parts, the Civil Protection Department says it remains on high alert, especially as the Meteorological Services Department has forecast more heavy rainfall. Relief teams continue to monitor dam levels and rainfall forecasts to issue early warnings and evacuation instructions.
They're joining the army or being killed.
Africa, where severe flooding across Limpopo and Mpumalanga provinces has left a trail of destruction as well. The government says it's taking measures to address the utter devastation in a region known as the Louveld. Dozens of people have been killed in the heavy rains and flooding of the region since the turn of the year now. With major infrastructure losses in the world-famous Kruger National Park, a special fund has been launched to spearhead its rebuild. Authorities say they are also evacuating the risks faced by communities living near rivers and streams there. CGTN's Julie Shire has more.
Tourism underpins the economies of Mpumalanga and Limpopo, the two provinces hardest hit by South Africa's recent floods. It is a major source of jobs and economic growth, making the impact of the disaster especially severe. To tackle this, the South African government and SANParks have jointly launched the Kruger Recovery Fund. This is a massive mobilization effort seeking national and international support to repair the damage. The devastation doesn't stop at the park's fences. Private lodges, owners and neighboring villages are currently isolated.
The Kruger Recovery Fund. That fund will be used solely to restructure or to get Kruger National Park to recover. So it will be used for infrastructure projects such as roads and bridges that has to be repaired, as well as accommodation facilities for staff and for tourists. So all the damage that was created by this flood will be addressed by that. And obviously we'll have government funding as well. But the amount of damage is of such a nature that we would need private donors.
As Minister Alkamp pointed out, this is a race against climate change. The focus is now firmly on shifting from emergency response to full-scale reconstruction, ensuring that the vital conservation region can once again support the families and businesses that rely on it. Judy Shara, CGTN, Kruger National Park, South Africa.
Well, let's get more on that story now. We're now joined live by Oscar Mtimkhulu, the Managing Executive for the Kruger National Park in South Africa. Oscar, thank you for joining us and giving us your time here. This is a worrying situation unfolding, obviously, over the past few days. Just how unusual are floods of this scale for the park? And could we say that Kruger is now becoming more vulnerable to extreme weather patterns?
Good afternoon to you and the viewers. Yes, definitely we are seeing more and more of this. They are becoming frequent. We experience this in a more frequent than we used to be in the past. So one could also, based on that, make an informed assessment to say, this is becoming a very usual and a common occurrence that needs to be dealt with.
Right, and looking at what could unfold from this, authorities have said that it may take years to fix the Kruger National Park there. What is the scale of damage that we're looking at right now and economic impact at this time?
Although we're still doing assessment on the extent of damage, but on preliminary assessment, it just there's an indication that it's going to cost us hundreds of millions of rand to try and repair our infrastructure. The most infrastructure that was damaged is our main roads and the bridges. But obviously, because that also helps to, boost the economy, because that's what we use to transport and that's what people use to link the better part of the park and also linking with the communities. So as a result of that, without that infrastructure, this, is not going to be possible for people to move around. It's not going to be possible to deliver services and products where they are needed. And that will be the impact of this severe flood damage.
Right, and also, Oscar, looking at it from where you sit, or what would you say are the biggest challenges in the recovery and rehabilitation process?
Well, our biggest challenge would be really to have enough resources to deal with this because the extent of the damage is really more exceed what we have. And so we would need more support, collaboration and partners that can help us to rebuild the Kruger National Park. Obviously, we would contribute what we have, but it's clearly not going to be enough for us to be able to rebuild the infrastructure that was built for years, and now that has been, damaged in few days.
Right, and going forward, maybe what lessons can be learned from these events this year, and how can the public or even conservation organizations support recovery efforts?
Well, I think the issue of climate change and global warming is a reality, and we need to build infrastructure going forward. I mean, looking into the future to say how is it going to withstand this kind of severe weather patterns and floods that comes with it. So we are currently looking at, we have just completed an assessment, which is, we have a draft report now to try and finalize it, to look at what kind of infrastructure that is in vulnerable areas and how can we improve those or enhance it so that it can withstand these such conditions that we can now say we're going to experience going forward. So those are some of the lessons learned. Obviously, we use early warning system, but also depends on the extent when you have floods or rain for an extended period. Even your infrastructure, start to fail, and where you rely on in terms of information, also as early warning system also, fail. So we need to look forward to say, how do we, from this situation, how do we become stronger and more resilient going to the future?
All right. Thank you, as always, for giving us your time on the program. Managing Executive at the Kruger National Park, Oscar Mtimkhulu, joining us live there from South Africa. Well, from Kruger, we head to Mozambique, where residents in affected areas are coming to terms with losses as they navigate waist-deep waters engulfing entire neighborhoods. Since mid-December, heavy rains have swamped large parts of Gaza, Maputo and Sofala provinces, raising river levels and prompting dam releases, worsening the situation. That is according to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Authorities say over 400,000 people have been affected, with numbers expected to rise as the rainfall continues. The UN Children's Agency says more than half the people forced to flee their homes in Mozambique due to the flooding are children. UNICEF says it just adds to the woes for many parents who were already struggling with their basic needs.
Flooding is also becoming an annual occurrence. It's children and families who are hit the hardest. We, again, as UNICEF, are particularly concerned about the combination of malnutrition. In Mozambique already, before this flooding, around 4 in 10 children were suffering from chronic malnutrition, and the combination of that and potential for waterborne disease.
Right, and moving away from environmental matters, for decades, health systems in Africa have leaned on a delicate balance, a partnership between government funding and foreign assistance. From HIV treatment to malaria prevention to vaccines, that balance is now shifting. U.S. cuts to funding and its withdrawal from over 60 international organizations is sending shockwaves across health systems on the continent. CGTN's Enoch Sikolia reports.
We caught up with Dr. David Khawea, a health financial expert who works as a senior research fellow at the University of Nairobi's Center for Epidemiological Modeling and Analysis. He has just concluded an analysis on the immediate impact of external funding withdrawal on Kenya's health sector, commissioned by the country's Ministry of Health.
For us to be able to see the impact, let's go back and look at what is it they have been funding. I mean, the external funding generally has been about 45%. But when you look at the external funding, the US government has been contributing about 60% of that. So ideally, what we are saying is that if they stop, we are definitely going to be affected in many fronts, including the strategic diseases like HIV, TB, malaria.
Here in Kenya, external assistance supports life-saving commodities, thousands of health workers, disease surveillance systems, vaccines and nutrition programs. Khawea's team calculated what funding will be missing and what services it paid for. The result, a multi-million-dollar gap. Funding for HIV has fallen by $112.1 million in the 2025-2026 financial year. Tuberculosis funding has also dropped by $107.7 million. This affects testing, treatment and tracing, the backbone of TB control. Malaria funding has fallen too, though less sharply. Vaccines face a shortfall of more than $23.2 million. Khawea warns of the long-term impact.
Some of these things we may not see the impact immediately because if you don't take medication today, it doesn't mean you die today. The effects may come much later. So what we are saying is that for the immediate impact, we see a decline in funding. But in terms of the health outcomes, those are things which come like now, what we are talking about 1 year now down the road.
But the largest gap is not medicine, it is people. Thousands of health workers hired under donor-funded programs are paid through external assistance.
Some of the facilities have been relying on US-funded staff to the tune of 80%. You go to a facility with about 5 staff, 4 of those staff are funded by the US government. So when they stop, there are 2 things that will happen. Either the staff continue to work without pay, or this staff look for something else to do.
Experts have outlined urgent options: raising domestic health funding, integrating donor programs into routine care, including essential medicines in health insurance, working with private suppliers to lower costs, exploring new financial tools from health bonds to targeted taxes. But none of these are quick fixes.
We've had what we call verticalized programs. HIV program. We have a HIV doctor a HIV nurse, a HIV clinic, and so on. Those things are now going away because what the government have realized that they need to integrate services so that instead of having a clinic for HIV, they have a clinic to offer healthcare. So you go there, you get all the services. That way, they end up saving on human resources.
For most African countries, the question is no longer whether external funding will fall, but whether health systems can survive when it does. Enoxikolia, CGTN.
Now, a new HIV prevention injection taken twice a year is raising hopes of controlling and potentially eliminating HIV in high-burden countries. In Uganda, as many as 36,000 doses of lenacapavir are expected in the country early this year, with at-risk groups being prioritized. However, despite the high number of doses, officials say it's insufficient. Isabel Nakiria reports.
Martin Nwamanya was born with HIV. He's been on antiretroviral drugs all his life and is now healthy. After taking regular medication, Martin cannot transmit the virus anymore, but he's struggled to find a life partner due to his HIV status.
It's basically because when you approach someone who is not living with the virus, they will have that fear. And somehow, even the people living with the virus wouldn't, I don't know, they have this thing of, we all have problems. So let's not combine two problems. They would rather get someone who is not living with the virus. So it's really funny out there.
Martin believes the new drug to prevent HIV will help shift attitudes towards people living with the virus, especially those who wish to live in a discordant relationship. That's when one partner has HIV, but the other does not.
Even now, like I told you, if I am to get a marriage partner, this is an injection someone would have to take only twice a year, okay? And they would be sure of protection from HIV. So even discordant relationships would thrive more because of such a drug.
Uganda was among the countries that took part in the research, where the drug proved more than 99% effective in HIV prevention. But many people won't be able to afford the $40 cost of each dose. The latest figures show Uganda recorded 37 new HIV infections in 2024. Authorities say the injectable drug could redefine how the world prevents HIV among at-risk groups like sex workers, discordant couples, or young girls.
We estimate that about 20% of pregnant and lactating mothers are at risk of acquiring the new infections. And the chair told you that we've not monitored mothers, when they come in for the first antenatal, visit, many of them are HIV negative. But by the time, when we keep monitoring them, by the time they deliver or during the lactating period, they seroconvert and become HIV positive. And again, the factors are what we've talked about. Either she's not open her HIV status, to her spouse. So for fear, of violence, gender-based violence and others, the source may be the spouse.
Uganda is among top 10 countries globally burdened with the disease, the reason it was selected to receive the doses. With 1.4 million people living with HIV in Uganda, this life-saving drug could significantly offer solutions to ending HIV/AIDS by 2030. But health industry experts say the government will need to step up efforts and provide more funding to the program. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. The Nigerian government approves new incentives for oil giant Shell and its offshore project in the country. And uncertainty surrounding the future of AGOA keeps South African exporters on edge. Nigerian President Bola Tinubu has green-lighted targeted investment-linked incentives for Shell's Bonga Southwest deepwater oil project. The proposed incentives are the latest in a raft of regulatory reforms in Africa's top crude oil producer as it looks to attract investment to boost oil and gas production. Incentives are also expected to be ring-fenced and focused on new capital, incremental production and strong local content delivery. Notably, Shell has invested some $7 billion in Bonga North and other projects since the start of Tinubu's presidential term in 2023. Gold rose to record levels earlier on Friday, whilst silver and platinum also extended gains to hit all-time peaks. Analysts attribute the rise to geopolitical and economic uncertainties, a weaker dollar and bets for U.S. Federal Reserve interest rate cuts. Spot gold scaled to just over $4,966 per ounce before retreating marginally. Spot silver reached $97.44 per ounce before also falling back slightly, and spot platinum climbed to just over $2,684 per ounce. Meanwhile, analysts are anticipating the Fed will deliver 2.25 percentage point rate cuts in the latter half of this year, raising non-yielding gold's appeal. South African exporters are anxiously awaiting a final decision from Washington on the so-called African Growth and Opportunity Act. The U.S. Senate has not yet confirmed the extension of the Preferential Trade Pact, but the legislation passed a major hurdle in the House of Representatives. However, due to South Africa's ongoing tensions with the Trump administration, there are concerns the country may be excluded from any agreement. Sumitra Naidu reports.
The U.S. House of Representatives voted to extend AGOA for a further 3 years. But it's not a done deal as yet. The U.S. Senate still needs to pass the legislation. In the meantime, there are question marks around South Africa's inclusion, which is causing some anxiousness amongst local exporters.
The U.S. trade agreement was first enacted 25 years ago under the George W. Bush administration, granting over 30 sub-Saharan African countries duty-free access on a wide range of goods to the U.S. market. In 2015, the legislation was renewed for a further 10 years, expiring in September 2025. Bernd Ulrich from AgriLink has been exporting fruit, mostly lychees, to the United States for nearly 9 years. Ulrich is concerned that if the advantages of AGOA are lost, the resulting 30% tariffs would make it too expensive to continue exports to America.
It's a big concern. It's a very expensive cost chain to get to the USA. It's not as inexpensive as Europe in terms of air freight or sea freight. It's much more expensive. The fruit is treated in the USA before it's released, so we have all of those costs. So any additional costs impacts our marketability and our sales and, of course, our returns to our growers. So, yes, in terms of AGOA, it does worry us, and it is something that we will need to look at once we know what the final decision is, whether we're in or out, and to what extent and with what percentage of value we will be levied or tariffed.
Once AGOA is passed by the U.S. Senate, it will still need to be signed off by President Donald Trump. Given the tenuous relationship and his ongoing hostile rhetoric towards the country, Trump could exclude South Africa.
In the U.S. Senate, where there are more reactionaries and they come from the traditionally white racist states, one in particular, John Kennedy says to the U.S. Trade Minister, leave South Africa out. They're not our friends. And so I suspect when this House of Representatives now has approved, the Senate will kick South Africa out. But if not, Trump will, because Trump and his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, are notoriously anti-South Africa.
The Department of Trade and Industry says tariff negotiations are ongoing with the U.S., but should it be excluded, it will use trade remedies under the WTO and continue exploring new markets.
We view the multilateral system with the WTO at its core as fundamental to global trade. We also really value the United States as a trading partner. You know, they're the biggest economy in the world, and one can't really run away from that fact. So we're not shutting the door at all on the U.S. Our butterfly strategy, which the minister has spoken about quite extensively, anchors South Africa's diversification on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Beyond Africa, we also have growing relationships in the East with the ASEAN nations, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore and the likes, Thailand, and of course China, a strategic partner in the East for South Africa, and the European Union has been a very solid trading partner for South Africa as well.
South African exports to the US under AGOA amounted to $8 billion in 2024. The duty-free agreement is important for the South African economy and for jobs. If excluded, the impact won't only be felt in South Africa, but in neighboring countries too, as value chains built over the past 25 years will be broken. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg.
Now, for many Africans, traveling to the United States is no longer just about securing a visa. It's now about having thousands of dollars to show up front. From January the 21st, the U.S. will expand a visa equals bond program requiring business and tourist visa applicants from more than 20 African countries to post refundable bonds of up to $15,000 before traveling. U.S. authorities say the policy is designed to curb visa overstays, but critics argue it could shut out legitimate travelers and deepen inequality in global travel access. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more from Abuja.
For Uche Ohiri, traveling to the United States was meant to mark a milestone. Having completed an online university program, she hoped to attend her graduation ceremony in person and visit family. But her plans ended when her U.S. visa application was denied. Now new rules have forced her to rethink reapplication plans, pushing it further into the future.
Maybe in the next 5 years or something, but at this moment, it's not a plan that I'm thinking about, coupled with everything that's happening and the new laws and policies being put in. Maybe later on I will think about it, but for now, not in my plan.
Under the expanded program, affected B1 and B2 visa applicants must provide a refundable bond of up to $15,000 before entering the United States. Travelers will also be required to enter and exit through designated airports: John F. Kennedy in New York, Dulles in Washington, D.C., or Logan Airport in Boston. Failure to comply with visa conditions or overstaying could result in the forfeiture of the bond. U.S. officials say the measure strengthens immigration compliance, but across Africa, the policy is already drawing criticism. Travel agents say the financial burden is influencing travel choices.
We have lots of credible, hardworking Nigerians that just want to go for vacation 10 days and go and return with no issues. And I understand that this ban and all of that is affecting that right now and affecting their decision because of the whole policies changing and everything. But if US is not going to work in, you can go to Canada, you can go to the UK, you can go to China, you can go to Paris and wherever.
While the bond is technically refundable, many say asking travelers to provide up to $15,000 upfront places U.S. travel out of reach for many middle-class Africans. Critics argue that the policy risks redefining global mobility not by intent or compliance, but by financial capacity. The move has also triggered diplomatic engagements. Speaking via telephone, Al-Qasim Abdul-Kadir, the media aide to Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, said, quote, "The United States of America has raised its concerns. The government of Nigeria has noted, and as usual, we're going to continue through diplomatic channels to ensure that these concerns are mutually resolved and will continue the cooperation, whether it's on consular issues, whether it's on military and security issues. The cooperation between Nigeria and the government of the United States continues." End of quote. Beyond diplomacy, there are broader economic implications. The policy could divert African travelers towards Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, regions seen as more accessible and less restrictive. For many, the concern is that the bond requirement reinforces long-standing disparities in who gets to move freely across borders. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, TikTok's parent company ByteDance has finalized a deal to set up a majority American-owned joint venture company. The move aims to avoid a U.S. ban on the popular social media app used by more than 200 million Americans. The deal is a milestone for the short video app after years of battles that began in August 2020 when President Trump first tried unsuccessfully to ban the app over what he called national security concerns. TikTok USDS Joint Venture LLC will secure U.S. user data, apps and the algorithm through data privacy and cybersecurity measures. The agreement provides for American and global investors to hold a stake of 80.1% in the new joint venture, while ByteDance will retain 19.9%. It's just about time for the sports news here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. Record winners Al Ahly host Yanga of Tanzania as the CAF Champions League resumes. Right, we begin with football, where following the conclusion of the Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco, attention now shifts to club football this weekend and to the CAF Champions League especially. Let's look at some of tonight's fixtures there. Record champions Al Ahly of Egypt host Tanzania's Young Africans in Cairo in Group B, and South African giants Mamelodi Sundowns welcome Sudan's Al Hilal Omdurman to Pretoria in a fixture expected to shape Group C's standings. It is the third round of fixtures in the group stage, marking the halfway point in the race for the knockout rounds. Meanwhile, African Player of the Year and Morocco star Achraf Hakimi has returned to his club Paris Saint-Germain after AFCON with a minor physical problem. Speaking ahead of tomorrow's Ligue 1 clash against Auxerre, PSG head coach Luis Enrique said his fullback was a doubt for the game.
It depends on how training goes, and I would like to talk to him because, for me, it's important to know individually how he feels, what he thinks exactly. But he's back and he's in normal condition. He has a minor physical problem, but nothing serious today. But tomorrow, maybe he'll come, maybe he won't.
Well, Enrique has also been speaking about teenage sensation Ibrahim Mbaye, who expanded his career medal haul in Morocco. The 17-year-old forward was one of the breakout stars in the Senegal side that beat Morocco in last weekend's AFCON final in Rabat, and was also a member of PSG's treble-winning squad from last season. Enrique says the African Cup of Nations is very important to Mbaye's overall development.
He has experience because he played a lot this season and last season too. And I think in terms of maturity, the Africa Cup of Nations was important for him. And every time he played, he did well. He showed that he was coming along. And I'm happy to have Ibe and Hakimi back. That's good news.
Manchester United have confirmed that Brazilian midfielder Casemiro will leave the club when his contract expires at the end of the season. Casemiro, who arrived from Real Madrid in 2022, will depart on a free transfer after United decided not to trigger a one-year extension option on his deal. The 33-year-old has scored 21 goals in 146 appearances for the Red Devils, following the £60 million move from Spain. The Brazil captain played a major role when United won the 2023 League Cup, scoring a stunning header in the final against Newcastle. He also helped the team lift the FA Cup the following season. World Football Chief Gianni Infantino has defended his decision to attend the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. The meeting, which doesn't focus on sporting issues, is held in the affluent alpine town of Davos every year. Infantino, who has come in for major criticism on ticket prices for the upcoming World Cup, says the forum is vital for FIFA to fulfill its role in contributing to global society.
Football and the football pitches and the football stadiums are areas, places where people can meet, can gather, can unite, can start and learn to know each other better. There are countries who don't have institutional political relationship with each other, and yet they play football together. Their fans, their people join in a football stadium and spend some time together. So this aspect of football contributing to society in such an important way is definitely a priority for FIFA, and for this reason we have to be at the World Economic Forum.
Now to some local golf, and Kenya's Njoroge Kibugu has been crowned the Order of Merit champion of the inaugural Sunshine Development Tour East Africa Swing. It follows a dominant victory in the final leg of the series at Nairobi's Karen Country Club. Kibugu teed off his final round tied for the lead in Karen with Rwanda's Celestine Nsanzuwera on 8 under par. The 22-year-old delivered a composed and clinical performance, carding a 6 under par 64 to pull clear and secure both the tournament and the overall Order of Merit crown. Nsanzuwera finished second. The top 12 players on the combined East Africa Swing and Big Easy Tour Order of Merit earned direct playing cards to the lucrative Sunshine Tour.
It feels good. It feels good. It feels like a statement. It feels like a statement. It feels like a testament to all the work I put in and how much more work I can put in to get better. And it lets me know that I have a bright future ahead.
To tennis and the Australian Open in Melbourne, where Novak Djokovic swept past Italy's Francesco Maestrelli in straight sets to advance. It leaves the Serb legend just one win away from becoming the first player to win 400 Grand Slam singles matches. Djokovic, who's also gunning for his 25th major title, wrapped up the first set with an ace. The 38-year-old broke the Maestrelli serve early in the second, and that was enough to win the set. However, the Italian did show flashes of what he's capable of at times. In the end, Djokovic won 6-3, 6-2, 6-2, and he marches on to the third round.
Yeah, actually it's same scoreline, so kind of similar feeling on the court of generally positive. Served better in the first match. I mean, did feel like completely two different tournaments, playing at night and day to day, particularly with the wind that has been, I think, blowing this year more than any other year that I've been playing here in Australia. So, you know, obviously have to adjust to that and adapt to a different opponent with big serve. But I mean, overall it's good. I'm pleased with the way I'm moving and hitting the ball. And yeah, look forward to the next one.
Meanwhile, world number 2 Yannick Sinner has also progressed, beating home favourite James Duckworth, also in straight sets. The two-time defending champion in Melbourne broke early in the first to set up a comfortable win there. The Australian provided stiffer resistance in the second, but Sinner eventually wrapped up the match 6-1, 6-4, 6-2. Sinner is in the bottom half of the draw with Djokovic, and they are on course to meet in the semi-finals. In the women's action, China's Wang Xinyu came from behind to stun the 2017 French Open winner Jelena Ostapenko. Ostapenko took the opener and broke for a 3-2 lead in the second, but that's as good as it got for the Latvian. Wang fought back to take the set, and her momentum carried her into the decider as she won 4-6, 6-4, 6-4. Wang, who's the only Chinese player left in the singles draw, will face the number 13 seed Czech Linda Noskova next. And that's where we leave it on this edition of Africa Live. Do remember, if you'd like to get in touch with the program, you can always send any feedback you have to those contacts on your screen, and why not give us a follow as well on our digital media platforms. I'm Mahia Mutua from myself and everyone here. Thanks for watching Africa Live.